The labyrinth swallowed the light, leaving only the damp chill of stone that refused to end. Daedalus pressed his palms against the jagged walls, tracing the deep, uneven fissures that ran like scars through the rock. He stopped where the stone felt brittle, his fingers trembling against the sharp edges. He pushed. A small piece of grit gave way, clicking as it hit the ground. The sound echoed into the dark, swallowed by the immense, hollow silence of the maze. He pulled his hand back, his breath hitching in the stagnant, heavy air. He moved to the center of the cell, where a single torch flickered, casting long, frantic shadows against the floor. Icarus lay nearby, his chest rising and falling in deep, steady rhythms, entirely lost to the world. Daedalus lowered himself to the floor, his jaw set in a line of iron. He reached into the dim light, his hands moving with desperate precision as he began to sketch on the rough, yellowed parchment. He did not look up. He sketched the mechanics of flight, his charcoal scratching against the paper, a rhythmic protest against the walls that held them. He worked in silence, ignoring the cold that seeped into his bones, focused only on the lines that promised a way out. Icarus stirred, the sound of his movement snapping Daedalus back to the immediate, cramped reality of the cell. The boy sat up, blinking against the torchlight, his gaze drifting from the sketches on the floor to the uneven stone above. He moved toward the wall, his feet bare against the cold floor. He found the narrow slit, a jagged fracture in the masonry, and pressed his face to the opening. The air that leaked through was different, thinner, cooler, and carrying the faint, sharp scent of salt. He gripped the stone edges, his fingers straining as he pulled himself up to see past the obstruction. Outside, the world was bleeding into the deep, bruised orange of a setting sun. High above the horizon, a flock of gulls cut through the haze. They banked as one, their white wings catching the final, dying rays of light. Icarus watched them, his breath hitching in his throat. He did not blink. He counted the beats of their wings against the vast, empty expanse of the clouds. They moved with a fluidity that mocked the heavy, unyielding stone of his prison. He pressed his knuckles against the wall until they turned white, his entire frame vibrating with a silent, aching hunger. The birds grew smaller, turning into mere specks against the darkening sky. But Icarus did not pull away. The sun rose, casting a harsh, pale beam across the cell floor. It revealed the debris scattered during the night, a collection of feathers, some short and downy, others long and stiff, collected from the wind-swept crevices of the tower. Daedalus knelt amidst the drift of feathers. He began to sort them, his movements sharp and rhythmic. He swept the small ones to his left, the long ones to his right, his hands moving with a practiced, mechanical intensity that left no room for hesitation. He gathered a lump of yellow wax, pressing it between his palms until the warmth of his skin made it pliable. He pinched a quill, coated the quill end in the cooling wax, and pressed it firmly against a light wooden frame. The smell of honey and heat filled the small space. He repeated the action, one feather after another, binding them with a precision that turned the chaotic pile into a structured, layered surface. Icarus sat a few feet away, watching the process, his breath hitching as the wings grew in size. They began to span the width of the cell, casting long, sweeping shadows against the rock. Daedalus did not look up. He merely reached for the next feather, his fingers steady, his focus entirely consumed by the growing geometry of the wings. Daedalus set the final quill and wiped the wax from his hands. He stood, his joints popping in the silence, and signaled for Icarus to approach. The boy stepped forward, his eyes locked on the massive feathered structures. Daedalus knelt behind him, threading leather straps through the wooden frame. He pulled the knots tight, biting his lip as the weight shifted onto the boy. Icarus gasped, his shoulders dropping under the sudden heavy burden. He took a hesitant step, then another. The wings swayed, the feathers hissing against the stone walls. He raised his arms. The span was immense, filling the air above them with a soft, rustling friction. Icarus turned, testing the balance. He stumbled, his heels clicking against the floor. Then he laughed. It was a sharp, sudden sound that rang against the cold rock, devoid of the caution that had defined their days in the cell. He spun, and the wings caught the air, creating a small, localized gust that ruffled the dust on the floor.
So you
Daedalus
have
did
flown,
not join the
have you?
laughter. He circled the boy, his gaze darting to every knot, every seam, and every point of tension. His face was a mask of rigid lines, his jaw locked tight. He reached out to grip the boy by his shoulders, his fingers digging into the frame. He opened his mouth to speak, but the warning caught in his throat, lost in the raw, infectious joy radiating from his son. They climbed the final stone steps that broke through to the summit. The air here was different, sharp, thin, and moving with a violence that made the wings tremble. They stood on the precipice, thousands of feet below. The ocean churned against the jagged base of the island, white foam marking the collision of water and rock. The wind tore at their bodies, whipping the air into a frantic rhythm. Icarus stood at the very brink, his toes inches from the drop, staring into the infinite blue horizon. Daedalus moved to his side, his own wings straining against the gale. He reached out and pressed a palm firmly against his son's chest, feeling the frantic, rapid beat of the boy's heart beneath his fingers. The sound of the surf rose in a deafening roar, swallowing the world. Daedalus leaned in, his mouth close to the boy's ear. He spoke, his voice strained and raw, forcing the words against the wind. Icarus did not turn. His gaze remained fixed on the sliver of sky above, his body leaning into the emptiness, oblivious to the man beside him. Daedalus pulled his hand back, his grip tightening on his own frame as he realized the warning would not reach him. The boy was already gone in his mind, pulled by the gravity of the clouds. Icarus did not look back. He leaned forward, toes leaving the stone, and surrendered to the pull of the abyss. The world dropped away. For a heartbeat, there was only the whistle of air past his ears and the weightless, sickening sensation of a fall. The wings remained limp, mere dead weight against his back, dragging him faster toward the surf. He plummeted, the ocean rising to meet him like a hungry mouth. Then, at the very edge of the spray, he snapped his arms wide. The frame shudders. The leather groaned under the sudden tension. The air caught. It was a violent, physical impact, as if he had slammed into a solid wall of wind. The descent halted with a jarring jolt that rattled his teeth. He did not sink further. Instead, the resistance pushed back, lifting him. He felt the lift travel through the wood into his spine, a sudden, upward surge that defied the gravity that had claimed him seconds before. He banked hard, the feathers screaming as they sliced through the gale. He tilted his head back, his throat baring to the sun, and let out a roar of pure, unadulterated triumph. The sound was a jagged tear in the silence of the heights, echoing against the cliffs as he climbed, higher and higher, into the golden haze. The triumph did not fade. It hardened. Icarus felt the air grow thin, a pale, biting cold that vanished the moment he tilted his face toward the sun. He climbed, his rhythm steady, his wings carving deep arcs into the sky. Far below, Daedalus banked his own frame, his eyes scanning the distance. Waving a desperate arm for the boy to level off, Icarus saw the motion. He saw the shift in his father's flight path, but he did not respond. The sun was no longer a distant star. It was a massive, swelling orb of white gold light that seemed to pulse in time with his own heart. He wanted to reach it. The exhilaration that had fueled his first rise now curdled into a singular, driving need to touch the source of the heat. He beat his wings harder, ignoring the strain in his shoulders and the way the air shimmered with an unnatural, dry intensity. He pushed higher, abandoning the safety of the lower currents. The light grew heavy, pressing against his skin like a physical weight. He reached out with a hand, fingers grasping at the radiance, his eyes wide and unblinking. He was no longer flying for the joy of movement. He was flying to consume the light, blind to the way the atmosphere had begun to warp around his path. The heat became absolute. It was no longer a sensation on the skin, but a force pulling at the structural integrity of the wings. At the tips, the wax turned to liquid, weeping down the frame in thin, dark streaks. A single feather broke free, caught in the updraft, and spiraled away. Then another, then a handful. The rhythm of Icarus's flight faltered. He felt the frame beneath his arms soften, the rigidity of the wood giving way to a sickening rubbery flex. He beat his wings, but the air no longer held him. The resistance vanished. A sharp, dry snap echoed against his shoulder as a primary quill sheared off, followed by the frantic tearing of parchment. He looked up. The sun was a blinding white hole, a void in the sky that offered no warmth, only destruction. The frame shudders, bucking violently against his back, and the symmetry of his lift collapsed. He tried to bank, but his left wing hung limp, a skeletal mess of wood and loose twine. The air rushed through the gaps where feathers had been. The lift was gone. He stopped climbing, the momentum of his ascent dying instantly, leaving him suspended in the thin, freezing silence of the upper atmosphere for one terrifying, weightless second. Gravity claimed him. There was no scream, only the sudden, rushing roar of air against his skin as he dropped. He kept his arms spread, a broken silhouette against the vast, indifferent blue. Feathers tore from the ruined frame, swirling around him in a chaotic wake that looked like winter snow in the middle of a furnace. Below, Daedalus saw the collapse. He folded his own wings tight, tucking his body into a spear-like dive to cut through the resistance of the air. He pushed his muscles until they burned, banking sharply to intercept the falling path. The distance was a cruel, widening chasm. Daedalus stretched a hand toward the boy, his fingers grasping at nothing but empty wind. He was screaming, but the sound was shredded by the speed of his own descent. Icarus continued to shrink, a small, dark speck against the immense horizon. Every time Daedalus leveled out to gain speed, the air currents pushed him back, stalling his momentum. He dived again, wings straining, the wood groaning under the pressure of his frantic reach. He was gaining speed, but he was losing time. He watched, breath trapped in his throat, as the boy plummeted into the depths of the sky, far beyond the reach of his desperate reaching hands. The surface of the sea broke with a final muffled sound. Hut-like spray of foam erupted, dissipated, and then the water smoothed over as if nothing had ever touched it. Daedalus descended, his own wings dragging in the heavy air, until his boots scraped against the jagged rocks of the distant shore. He pulled his wings against his back. The wood splintered and the wax cold, and collapsed onto the stone. He did not look for a path or a sign. He looked at the water. Near the spot where the boy had vanished, a single white feather drifted on the surface. It bobbed once, caught in a slow swell, then settled into the dark water. The sun touched the edge of the world, bleeding its gold into the tide. The light retreated, pulling the warmth from the rocks and turning the sea from a shimmering expanse into a hollow, deep blue. Daedalus remained motionless, his hands resting on his knees, staring into the vast, featureless horizon. The wind died down. The sound of the surf grew distant. He watched the last of the light vanish behind the waves. The sky above was empty. The sea remained silent. There was nothing left to follow.